And you're listening to the Movement Public Media ahead. Beyond Ukraine's borders, the country's diaspora is also feeling the effects of the war. We'll hear what the conflict has meant for one shop owner in Chicago's.
Okay, good morning. Excuse me. Good morning, Joan Parker. Are you one of the translators, ASL? Hi, Mike Rojas.
Hey, John, how's it going?
Okay, so I just made you a co-host, so if you can recognize the translators and let them in, promote them, let them get pinned when necessary.
Yep, I was just looking at the participant list to see when they are coming on, but yes, I got that.
Okay, great. Morning, Pops.
Hi, John. How are you?
Good, how are you?
I'm okay.
Sorry, we're not doing this with you from Paris.
Yeah, actually, I'm happy you're home right now.
Oh, good.
Where's my video and why isn't my background?
Okay, let me make you a co-host here.
You know what? I'm going to pause my video. My background somehow is not loading, but maybe it'll load. Otherwise, I might want to restart my computer. I had this problem before, and I restarted the computer, and it was fine.
Okay,
But I need my background because it's a picture that Jamie really likes.
all right.
Yeah, this is really annoying. Which is why you start early.
Exactly right.
All right, I'm going to reboot and I will be right back.
Mhm.
John, I noticed that it's showing that this is recording. Did you start the recording already?
Oh, actually, it just automatically started. Thank you. And I think we are actually on time. I want to say good morning, everybody. My name is John Fisher. I am the Fair Housing Coordinator at the group called Wayfinders, which is in the western part of Massachusetts. And I'm not going to do a particularly long introduction because many of you people already know who we have here. If not, I think neither of them are terribly short for words in terms of introducing themselves. Other than I do have to mention that Jamie Williamson was my partner way back at the very, very beginning of this whole series of fair housing and civil rights conferences, 16 years ago. At that time I had hair even, so take it away, Jamie.
Okay. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, great. Well, welcome again to the 16th Annual Fair Housing and Civil Rights Conference. It's so wonderful to be here. John, you may have had hair. Mine was black back then, so we're in the same boat, okay?
Mine was white.
Well, it's wonderful to be back here again, and it's so great to see that even though we are virtual, we're dealing with a pandemic, we've been able to continue to do this conference. I love the fact that we're doing it, and now we've actually expanded to over 1,000 people who are now attending the conference. It's incredible, right? From all over the world. We have people coming from Africa, South Africa, from the Caribbean, from Spain, from Canada. So our reach is far and wide. And so I thank you all for continuing to spread the word of a very important conference that happens every year during Fair Housing Month. And we continue to ask you to continue to share that information. We have a wonderful platform this year so that we are able to continue to add additional programming throughout the year, which is a wonderful addition to the work that we do. So we encourage you to reach out to John Fisher if there's some particular item that you think is important for us to have a workshop on, or to have a webinar. We'd be glad to do that. So please spread the word. We want to continue to be a repository for all of the things that are fair housing and civil rights related in Western Massachusetts. Clearly that is where we're located, but as you can see, our extent is far beyond that. So please share all of that information with us as you continue to do great things around the country. We really appreciate it. I'm very excited today to introduce our speaker. Pops and I are no stranger to this conference. We've both been here before. Pops is a wonderful local artist in my area, I should say my former area, and he's located in Stockbridge, Massachusetts. He lives in Stephentown, I believe. Stephentown, New York. Is that correct, Pops?
Hillsdale.
Hillsdale. Okay. All right. And so we are going to have a little fireside chat, have a conversation about art to break it up a little bit. But of course, we will be looking at things that have to do with social protest, art as protest. We'll talk about some public art pieces because I think it's important to start having that conversation as it begins to seep into all of our economies. I think there isn't a city or town that doesn't have some level of an arts festival happening every year. So Pops, let's get started. Let's see. All righty. So the question here is, does art imitate life or does life imitate art? I can't see the screen, but just like your reflections on that concept from Oscar Wilde.
Well, life is art, really, and people make art just to express what they're going through and to communicate with other people. So it's really all part of the same process, I always thought. We record what we've done, we try to share our feelings, and in the whole process, we make art. And then when we see art, it can inspire us to change our lives and change our viewpoints and to communicate better with one another and to record our feelings for the future. So Oscar Wilde was totally right about that, I believe.
Right. Wonderful. Well, I do believe that, it's back and forth. It's a back and forth between the two. It's a lovely mixture. And it works to soothe the soul, I think. And so I look forward to having that wonderful conversation with you. I do want to let you know that your screen is frozen, so you may be having some technical difficulties. The good news is that we still get to hear you.
Okay. Maybe if I stop my video and start it again.
Okay. And while he's working on that, I'd like to share one of Pops's pieces that he has done, his pieces of work that he's done. And I think this one is a great one because it gives you what he's doing. You get the concept of taking a Rockwell and reimagining it for modern day. And so it looks like he's back. Do you want to have some more conversation about this particular piece, Pops?
I'm not seeing the piece, Jamie.
It is the Thanksgiving.
Okay, I only see myself for some reason here. Okay, so the Thanksgiving piece is based on Rockwell's Freedom from Want, which was a poster that he created as a series of posters called the Four Freedoms back in World War II. And he was such a draw and so powerful an artist and so well known back in the day as the major illustrator for the Saturday Evening Post that he put these paintings on tour and sold poster versions of them and raised like $200 million for the war effort back in the day. I mean, that was a tremendous, you can imagine how much money that would be in today's money. So freedom from want, freedom from fear, freedom of religion, and freedom of speech are the four freedoms. And my version I did at actually a Thanksgiving dinner that we had. My friends really have always rallied around this project when I had the idea to recreate the Rockwells as if they were being done in the current day instead of 50 and 75 years ago. It really excited the community, and I've had nothing but incredible support. So my friend said, "Oh, we're having Thanksgiving. Why don't you bring the camera and some lights and do the picture here?" So that was my version. And we changed. Actually, I was not going to be. That's me in the picture. I wasn't going to be in the picture, but my friend said, "No, I don't want to be in it. You got to be in it." So it kind of changed the nature of the picture, and now I call it Thanksgiving Gay Dinner because that's me and my husband in the background presenting the turkey.
That's great. Okay, let's see if we can do the next one. Okay, this one is another Pops original. And I believe, Pops, this is of the hockey player.
Yeah, so I did all my four freedoms, and you had the idea as the chair of the MCAD,
MCAD, Massachusetts Commission Against
and
Discrimination
you
at the
made me the
time.
artist in residence, and you said, I need my own freedom. And you said, do freedom from shame, which kind of baffled me. I didn't know what I would do, and I had a couple of ideas that you thought were very cheesy. So then one day I walked into a dinner party, and there was this young man there. His name is Dylan Bader, and he was just, sitting at the dinner table and talking with his sister and his father. And it took a while before I even noticed that he only had one full arm. The other arm ended at the elbow. And he actually had been born that way. But still, he had the courage to go and play hockey on a hockey team and just live his life. And it just really, really, really shook me that here is this guy who is just unassuming and comfortable, um, even with this deformity, and had the guts to go out and play hockey because that cannot be easy to do when you've only got one arm. And he was on the team, so obviously he did a good job. And I said, "This is it. This is the freedom from shame," because I know what it's like to be different, walking into a room and everybody looks at you for whatever reason, and the way people look at people who have disabilities. Nobody looks at them with pride or with joy. So it's like they're always being shunned. They're always looking away. So I wanted to show him as a winner. I wanted to show him as a brave person who faces challenges every day wherever he goes, but he doesn't let his disabilities get him down. So we went into the studio and I staged the scene as if he just won a big hockey tournament. That's the champagne being poured over his head. And the picture, I was really very happy about it. I've been doing all these Rockwells where I just recreate a Rockwell, but this was my own original composition and idea, but done in the style of Rockwell.
Right.
So I called it Freedom from Shame, and then it was incredible that the Massachusetts Office on Disability saw it and they loved the picture, and they thought that it would be a great idea to have a statewide art competition for the disabled community based on my picture. And they asked me to be a judge, etc. And I said, okay, fine, no problem. Let's see what happens. We didn't know what would happen with it. We thought maybe we'd show it in a college or some business office or something like that, some business building. And but it actually wound up at the Massachusetts State House, and it became really one of the most amazing and gratifying days of my whole life, because all these disabled artists who had submitted works got to go in front of this when we had the opening of this big room full of people, and they got to walk up with pride and have people looking at them with admiration, and people who basically don't get looked at in any other than just disdainful ways, except by their loved ones. So the fact that I could inspire that kind of pride and joy, it was just an amazing feeling.
Right. I understand that. I have a friend who is in a wheelchair, and she used to have a collie that she always had with her. And she said the reason why she always brought the dog everywhere she went is that people would gravitate toward the dog. And in that way, they wouldn't turn their eyes away from her. And so that she felt like she would be seen. And, we should take a moment and think about that, right? The notion that a disabled person has to have something else in order for us to be drawn into them as if they were part of the human race. I think we're getting better at that, but I still think we have a long way to go. And, obviously the work that we do here in civil rights is part and parcel part of that. So I'm glad that you were able to use this particular one as the fifth freedom. So thank you very much for that. And here's a lovely one. I happen to have a special fondness for this. I might know somebody in the picture. But let's talk about this particular one.
I know which one it is. Somehow, Jamie, I'm not seeing your screen.
Okay, so
I hope everybody else is seeing it, but I know what you're talking about.
Rosa
This picture-
Parks.
Rosa Parks?
This is the women. I did not.
Oh, okay.
I wasn't able to put that one in.
Okay, so this is I'm With Her, which was a celebration of the Women's March back in 2017 that occurred in Washington, D.C., but also in 600 towns and cities around the world, which was something I wasn't even aware of until I started doing the picture. So I wanted to show the international scope of the Women's March, and also the outrage that not only women, because there are several men featured in the picture, were feeling. And also I wanted to represent women who have fought for change through the centuries. So the front row has Sojourner Truth and Harriet Tubman. They've got some suffragettes, a flapper girl, Rosie the Riveter, and modern American, Rosa Parks, obviously, and a modern American mother in the front line, all fighting for peace. So that was my concept. And in the sky, in the rainbow, I have names of many of the cities that were involved, and also in the flooring, I have the names of the cities. And on top, of course, is Lady Justice. So.
Right. I think, I'm not sure how much on the screen that all can see, but Lady Justice is in the back left-hand corner. I'm sorry, in the right. Is it on the right side? And then you have the Statue of Liberty on the left-hand side. It's a great piece. Okay, so here we have Freedom from Fear. And we have both the Norman Rockwell and yours. And I'm not sure if people can see yours. Hopefully they can. This is the one where the headline says, "I can't breathe."
Yeah, okay, so Freedom from Fear is one of the 4 freedoms that were done for the war effort. And in the Rockwell original, the white family is putting their kids to bed in the comfort of America, which is free of the violence going on over in Europe. So the Blitzkrieg is happening, and the newspaper headline the father is holding is talking about the Blitzkrieg and how the bombs are going down. But the idea is that here in America, we're safe and we have freedom from fear. But my version, I wanted to show that even today, in some neighborhoods, people do not enjoy all those freedoms. The father, you can see, is looking over his shoulder at what's going on outside the window. There's a light in the window, which he knows is police lights. So this is actually my most famous picture. It's been featured in the New York Times and the Boston Globe and on several networks, and also many museums across the country. Ironically, my picture has a headline that says "I can't breathe," which, when I did the picture, it was the last words of Eric Garner, who had been murdered by New York City police in the chokehold, the famous chokehold. And that was a rallying cry back then, which is now 7 years ago. And this picture was actually chosen 1 out of 1,000 entrants to be featured at the Denver Art Museum, which totally blew my mind that out of all these entries, I would be selected. And I was just overwhelmed that this picture would get me selected on my own wall in the museum for quite some time. But what really, really was like a lightning strike was the week after it was selected, George Floyd was murdered, and he uttered the same words, "I can't breathe." So it was kind of a mystical thing that happened, and the picture just gained all the weight of all this strife and pain. So, you know, it's not a happy thing for me to have all this attention on this picture, but I feel it is significant, and I feel gratified that I was able to make a statement that has struck such a chord with the public.
Okay, and we actually have a question that's in the chat. Someone has asked for you to repeat the 4 freedoms. So you have freedom
Okay.
from fear, freedom from want,
Freedom of speech, and freedom of religion.
Okay, and so I have typed those back into the chat for all who were interested. Okay. All right, and let's move on to the next one. It is the shooting of Michael Brown. It's your response to that, which is the picture of Ruby Bridges.
Oh my goodness. Well, when Michael Brown was shot in Ferguson and the riots happened, it really, really set me in a tailspin, because I remember the riots that happened when I was a kid going to school in Harlem after Martin Luther King was shot. And that had happened 50 years prior. And it just killed me that when I was a kid, you know, Martin Luther King was shot, and then riots happened, and after that there was all this social change. So many things changed, so many, you know, doors open for Black people, and things seemed to get better and better, and then Obama was in office. But when those riots happened, it just took me back to being a kid and being scared to go to school every day. And furthermore, I was just really, really incensed that all the news outlets were talking about was Michael Brown a thief, and did he deserve to be killed, or was the cop a murderer, and just focusing on that one incident. And it's never an incident that makes a riot. What makes a riot is the fact that the people are so upset and angry about the way they've been treated, about some issue going on. You know, they don't have food. They actually, what turned out is the police were harassing the community for years and years, you know, with ticket quotas and, you know, and stop and frisk or whatever they were doing. And the, you know, the community was just fed up with the mistreatment and the lack of opportunity that they had. And that is what the riot was really about. So nobody was talking about that. And then nobody went back to see, how do people deal with the fact that all of a sudden now your neighborhood is like a war zone, you know, and kids have to go to school in this. So I took the image of Ruby Bridges being escorted into school in New Orleans, and I brought her to walking through the rubble of the Ferguson riots, and that was also kind of a big hit. But um, it was a painful thing to do. I basically was crying the whole time. I had intended to redo this picture like the others and hire a model, have costumes made, and do a set and everything. But I was just so upset that I pulled the whole thing together with newspaper images, and I mashed them all up to make a kind of a fictionalized riot scene, but all based on the exact, with images from the real riot. And I put Ruby into the image as if she was walking through it with her shadow, and that also seemed to be very inspirational to people, which actually brought me to my most recent work. Are you going to talk about that soon?
We're getting there.
Okay.
We're now looking at the Give Now with the two sailors.
Oh gosh, yeah. So as I kept on updating these Rockwell pictures, and Rockwell had a picture called Give Now, and it was two male sailors back in the war again, raising money for the war effort. But what had happened, which also really just tore my heart out, was the hurricane. After Trump was elected, there was this big hurricane down in Puerto Rico, and he went down there and was like tossing out rolls of paper towels, and basically Puerto Rico was really, really stranded and not helped nearly enough, not nearly fast enough. And I was just totally outraged, and I felt that I had to do something. So I actually I had a fundraiser, and I asked people to come on my birthday into a club and donate money. So I actually wound up sending a few $1,000s down to the Children's Hospital in Puerto Rico. So, and also if you look at the picture, you'll see that there's a female sailor as well as a Latinx sailor. So those
Right.
are my updates to that picture.
Excellent. So I'm going to do this. All right. So now we have the Asian hate piece.
Oh. Wow. So anyway, I've been trying to do more original pieces. I've done quite a bit of Rockwell pictures, and they've been, very well received. I had my own exhibition at the Rockwell Museum that turned out to be the longest running solo exhibition they've ever had. But I wanted to just make my own statement more. So thanks to somebody in the White House casting aspersions on Asian people, hate crimes against Asians had really skyrocketed, and to this day are still a huge problem.
Right.
And I had a friend, actually she was one of my assistants, named Taylor, who was telling me how in one of our neighboring towns, she really felt fearful, and I just thought that was just, a horrible thing to think that this has even come to where we live here, which is pretty much of an idyllic situation, at least South County anyway. So, so I took Taylor and I based this one actually on The Scream by Edvard Munch. And you can see she's walking, trying to mind her own business, but there are two figures coming up behind her. So in her hand, she's holding keys in case she has to strike out at her, in case they should happen to attack her. So I call this one China Virus.
Okay, the next one we have is a little boy and his dad.
And his dad and his two dads.
Okay.
And they're actually, that's my preacher and his husband and their son. And this picture is called Sunday Morning, or the Meaning of Family. And I just thought it was very important to show a really happy piece about gay families, to let the world know that we're here and we love and we go to church just like your family.
All right. And so here's the big one. It's a walk with her. And this is where we get into some public space. And I just want to say this. I remember when we were first talking about all of the work and envisioning what your career would be like and the things that you can do. And you were all excited and wanted to do a mural in Boston. And now, asking for my help. And I'm thinking, okay, look, that's kind of a big stretch for me. There's a lot of stuff I can do, but I don't even know how to do that. It seems like it would be overwhelming. A lot of pieces, a lot of process. And so maybe that you finally made it happen. So congratulations. That's awesome. You did it in my
It's really
hometown.
interesting because you know what? You said, forget it. It's
It's
not
just
gonna
not gonna
happen.
happen.
And I said, okay, I'll forget it. But I still had this image in my mind that I'd like to do something like that one day. And then all of a sudden, when the Rockwell show was over and I figured I was totally washed up, I got this call from a neighborhood group called the West Side Legends in Pittsfield. And they said, we're doing a mural. We want you to help us do it. I said, okay, fine, sure. He said, it's going to be a community effort and we're going to have everybody submit pictures and you can help us choose. I said, whatever you want, that's fine, I'll help you. So then behind my back, they did all the canvassing and they got all the submissions and without even telling me that they were doing it. And then basically they called me up to tell me that they chose me. And I said, oh, well, that's nice. I've always wanted to do a mural. And they showed me where they wanted to do it. And I said, I thought it was like, 10 feet tall or whatever. And I said, oh, that's nice. Very nice place. Turned out to be 30 feet tall on a location that went actually like 125 feet across.
Right.
So I said, wow, let's do it this way. Let's take Ruby and have her look like she's walking through the landscape. And on the right-hand side is a signpost that says Jubilee Hill. And that commemorates the fact that the very road where the mural is the result of a community renewal, urban renewal.
Right. So
project.
it was an urban renewal project that happened back in the 70s, early 70s.
Correct.
And what they did was they tore down all of the houses that were located on Jubilee Hill, and they built what they call then, and probably still now, housing projects, and really took away from the character of the community in terms of, the housing that was there. And the goal was to increase, many of us in the civil rights and fair housing world, have other terms for this particular process that took place where they literally went around and just started devastating all of these communities and then not giving them enough money to actually rebuild. In this particular city and town, one of the things that they tore down was the train station, one of the most beautiful pieces of art. And I say it as art because it was all marble. It was gorgeous. It would have stood for hundreds and probably thousands of years, how well it was built. And we lost a lot of spaces to that, a lot of spaces to urban renewal coming in. And what happened was that they started, paving the way and tearing things down, and then ran out of money to do anything. And so a lot of cities were left with these blighted areas with nothing on them now except rubble. So,
Right.
this, and I will just say this, my aunt actually was in one of the houses. She was renting one of the houses that were torn down, and so she was required to move. So this is particularly, close to my heart because I know the story, because I remember my aunt calling my mom crying that they were going to be tearing down her home and that she would have to find a new place to live. And
These are
this is
unsung heroes who sacrificed their homes, their neighborhoods, their friends, their access to work, and for whatever, probably very little money, or they're renters, they get no money, they just have to get out. And people have made these sacrifices all over the country with no thanks at
Right.
all. So I just wanted to commemorate the people who were displaced on Jubilee Hill for this road called College Way, which actually really doesn't go anywhere.
Well, technically it does. It's actually a piece of West Street that most people don't realize, and it dumps back into West Street. So it's an odd
Right.
space.
It goes from
And
West
I
Street
say
to
that
West Street.
because I have to pass that in order to go to my house if I leave North Street.
Yeah. So anyway, I just wanted to take advantage of amazing space that I had to make that statement that people should be that we owe a debt to people who just kicked around for
Right.
these projects, and some of them are not really all that necessary, and so many of them are people of or neighborhoods with people of color, black people, Japanese people, whatever. There's a they call it urban removal
Right. Well,
often.
there was another name that started with N, and know, but it ended with O, so it was another word. They used to say it was Negro removal.
Hmm.
Not very flattering, but it was meant to take a jab at HUD for the way in which they chose to do this. And of course, they had to collaborate with cities. So cities picked the area. So that is one of the reasons why it was such a hated program, because it really was meant to remove, and it felt like that, I should say. I don't think HUD's goal was that. I think HUD had a different goal. However, anytime that there are policies, sometimes they do become weapons. And in this particular case, I think the low income and communities of color felt that they were being weaponized by the policies that were really developed to actually help them, and instead ended up hurting them. And you see that again, where Susan and I from HUD yesterday were having a conversation about the fact that cities and towns are being gentrified. And when gentrification takes place, it sounds like a really good thing, because you're taking old homes and you're renovating them and you're bringing them up to current standards. However, it changes the demographics of the neighborhood. It increases the taxes. It moves people out, and eventually the original people that live there are no longer able to afford being there. And we see that time and time again. But it's great that this, I think, is a great commemoration of a reminder of what it means to sacrifice. As we all know, that Ruby Bridges did quite amount of sacrifice an entire year as a student by herself in her elementary school in New Orleans. I couldn't think something more fitting to be in that space. So thank you for that. Thank you as a former resident of the city of Pittsfield. I really appreciate that. And what a lovely way to use that space. So thank you. Let's take a look at the next piece. And I apologize, my computer is doing its own thing here. So when we were talking about women, we moved to a picture. It's called The Aspiration of Public Art, and the Fearless Girl that sat across from the bull that was done by Kristen Visbal.
This work was originally a temporary work, commissioned by Morgan Stanley, I believe. Is that true, Damien?
No, it was actually another
Merrill
finance
Lynch.
company, and I can't recall their name. They're actually a Boston-based company. I think it's Strategic Finance or Strategic Marketing Finance Group or something of that nature.
Right. I think you know more about this one than I do.
No, I just happen to know that piece. But what's beautiful about this one is that it's the aspiration of art, and that's what I wanted to be able to demonstrate, is that public art is can be very much aspirational and give you that sense. And what we have here is this young girl standing next to the fearless girl, actually mimicking that same pose, and how beautiful that is. And then to the left of it, there is a young girl that's has a sign that says, girls are strong, and how art can give that sense of an emotion that people bond with the art, but also that they get that aspirational piece of it, right? That sense of
And
power,
inspirational,
right?
because girls say that, oh, here I am at the stock market,
That's right.
and I belong here.
That's right. And this one
With
now, what ended up happening is that they commissioned this piece, was only supposed to be there for a few days. And the public fell so much in love with it that it became iconic overnight, right? And as a result of that, they ended up moving the girl not, back to the corporate offices, but they put her in front of the New York Stock Exchange. And I can't think of a better way. Women, classically and historically have been marginalized and not having access to opportunities, especially in the financial world, to be able to be in that space. And so to start them young, and I think that's what art does, right? Art gives you that sense of imagination of possibilities. And for me, I know this picture, when I look at the young girls, that I think about all of the ways in which we need to have role models. And they don't always have to be people in person, right? Or real people, but art is another way of giving people an opportunity to model and to feel a part of something and be inspired by something. So let's take another look at the way we might engage with art. Okay, some shameless plugging of myself because I couldn't find anybody else. This is public art and tourism, right? Just to have some fun with it. And so there is a picture of me in my version, because I'm much older, that Rosie the Riveter would have been more my inspiration. And then a picture of me thanking Lincoln for freeing the slaves so that I could be there with him today in Maryland. And then at the right corner is it's actually another, and I don't know who this person is, and I think that's the other piece of it, that sometimes art is just that, and to have a little bit of fun. And so it's an older woman holding some some groceries with a piece of bread, and I am actually attempting to eat the bread from her bag as she looks on in disgust. So, again, I think it's wonderful how, people do this. And of course, up in the right-hand corner is the love. It's the love. What is it? It's not a statue. It is a, and okay, we'll call it a statue for all intents and purposes, but it is from, it's one, I think there's in Philadelphia, which used to be right by my house. And everyone used to stand in front of it and get their picture taken. It was that, and it's the iconic piece that spells LOVE. And so it's a sculpture. That's it.
Right, not a statue, but a sculpture.
Sculpture. That's what I was. Yeah. That was the word I was looking for. Thank you so much. Again, to begin to think about how we can engage with art and what it looks like from a public perspective, right? I think that there are a lot of different types of public art. And I think, for me anyways, I have always been drawn to anything that sparks the imagination and also to have a little bit of fun and when one's on vacation. And again, I think these are also opportunities for tourism in communities, right? So this is an area that was being rehabbed in Maryland and has now become quite the tourist attraction. And so they have all of these lovely little statues along the sides of the street. And I remember you and I were having a conversation about that. I think there were cows. The cows was the first project with these little communities having you paint the animal, and sometimes they're auctioned off. Did you ever do one of those?
No, that was before I actually was, at that time I was just busy putting a business together. I wasn't doing much artwork.
Okay. Yeah, I love all kinds of art.
I just want to get back to the love statue, love sculpture. It's as fun as it seems and as light as it seems. It's basically, it was inspired by the Vietnam War, because at that time everybody was saying all you need is love to counteract the draft and all the destruction going over in Vietnam. So that actually was the love statue that we see today was born of a lot of pain and political strife.
All right. Well, there is a piece in the chat that came in from Charles, who says, what the world needs now is love, sweet love. It's the only thing that there's just too little of. And I happen to love that song as well. And I think that's very appropriate that it is. And given the fact that we are on the heels of a war and and that war is raging and we see it on the news, and I think we are all with Ukraine and their fight. Again, these symbols have meanings and can be used in those moments to just bring comfort to people. But let's talk a little bit about women in art. One of and I didn't know this, so this was quite the surprise to me. This is the piece from, it's called the Guerrilla Girls, and they came about as a response to women not having access to spaces in the art world, and that they weren't given the same opportunity to be in museums. And so this one says, do women have to be naked to get into the Met Museum? And then it recognizes something that, like I said, I didn't know, that less than 4% of the artists in the modern art sections are women, but 76% of the nudes are female. And, it was interesting because when I went to go look for some, different artists, and so I put in public art and women. And it didn't give me the women as artists. What it gave me was all of the women who were shown, right? So the depictions of women. And when you think about it, throughout all her, throughout history, you have a lot of women in the nudes. I know when I was at the Louvre, now my favorite, she wasn't nude, but seeing some of the different art and experiencing all of the ways that women are depicted in art, and not realizing that women themselves don't have the ability to be in those spaces as artists. Now, the Guerrilla Girls started, I believe it was in the late 80s or mid 80s. And as a result, these statistics, I believe, have changed. But they're very popular in the sense of continuing to drive the notion. And they talk about pay equity, they talk about discrimination. And what you'll see oftentimes, especially in art with women, a lot of reflection about the community, right? And it's not to say that men don't do the same thing. It's just that I think a lot of times we need to hear all of those voices, right? Women's voices who will speak to the things that men perhaps won't, like the treatment of women, which is why I loved your piece with her, because it recognizes as a male the importance of understanding the difficult times that women have in our communities and the struggles that they have and that they have overcome. So
And fought for.
that's right.
There was blood on all those successes, all those, everything that helped somebody was hurt, somebody bled, somebody died.
Right. Exactly. And so, let's think about that and continue to push to have more women in the art world, in spaces and given opportunities. On this particular one, I was showing it's a sign of the times. Again, I wanted to have a conversation about public art and how it does, in some sense, mirror what's going on, or that it speaks to certain things. And I think in the upper left-hand corner, there's a woman with an Afro pick, and the Afro pick is the public piece of art. And then underneath it is the statue is called Embrace. And it is, two hands wrapped around. And I believe that this particular one was in the Boston Common. And then up in the right-hand corner, it is a bunch of Black men in what looks like a milk with their arms up in the air, as if to say that they are giving up. And I think we all know what that's from. Again, demonstrating a sign of the times. And so art being reflective in public spaces and reflecting what's going on in the country.
The ones with the men with their hands in the air, I believe that is actually representing the gold miners in South Africa who have to be inspected in the nude before they leave work every day.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, see, art can mean many things to many people, right? It's all up to interpretation, how you see it without knowing, right?
It's all what you bring to it.
Right. And I think that's a lot of the way people look at art. They say, it is in the beholder, right? How do you interpret what you see? If the artist wasn't there telling you what it meant, would you have the same meaning? Which is what I think is the beauty of art, right? That at the end of the day, it can mean something different to so many people. Have you seen that where people that are viewing your art may have different responses to
it's
it?
really interesting. I was when I was doing the CBS Sunday Morning piece, the producer says, what were you trying to say, that the little girl has her eyes closed, but the boy has his eyes open in the bed? I said, well, the girl had her eyes closed and the boy had his eyes open when we took the picture. There was nothing to it, but people are trying to read and make something of every single thing. And I think that's just wonderful,
Right.
You just never know. You bring something into the world, you just never know where it's gonna go, or what somebody's gonna make of it, or what somebody's gonna see in it. And that's all great.
Right. It's where it lands and to whom it lands on. And that's what I love. Like you said, that's what I truly love about art is that we can see many different things. And I used to, when I was in school, I used to hate when they would say, what is the author trying to say? I'm like, well, that's up to me to decide, not for you to tell me what he's saying. I've always felt that anything that is consumable like that belongs to the person who is engaging with it, and not necessarily, and of course they want you to say that he meant this and meant that. And I remember as a child, I would say, how do you know what he meant? He's dead.
Exactly. Yeah.
you
Unless
know,
he said that's what it means, you don't know what it meant.
exactly. They have all of these things that I just remember in that space thinking, I think they're just making this stuff up. But, to me, like I said, I think art is one that we as the individual consume and think about and are inspired by or moved by a piece. It's really up to us to determine a little bit of that. And I hope that the artists appreciate us doing that. Next picture we have here is a Banksy picture where he says society gets the kind of vandalism it deserves. And then to the right, and I thought I did this purposefully because it's the juxtaposition of what you may consider and the way people look at art is I have a Keith Haring picture to the left, which is the one that's actually in Philadelphia with all of the different people as shapes. And the notion of, what is art and what is public art and how do we consume it? And Banksy, I think, is very much a political, does a lot of political commentary. And so you'll often see his work like that. I think he has a picture of a little girl with the balloons and the girl goes afloat, but you'll see it's an iconic picture that then turns into other people taking it and using it and reimagining it for different scenarios or different particular issues that they may be dealing with, right? Is that a young girl floating between space, so to speak. And I think that his intent was the Middle East on that particular one. But I know you know a little bit about Keith Haring. Would you like to share some thoughts on his work?
Yeah, Keith was a brilliant, insouciant, just comical genius who came up with these with this a style that is totally recognizable of everybody. It's just like outlines of babies crawling and people dancing, etc. And he was quite the sensation in his early 20s, and this is back in the 70s and 80s. I think the 80s he came out and was an international sensation. And he was gay and he lived his life as an out gay man. And then, unfortunately, he did contract AIDS, which is back then was it was a death sentence. And he took to activism in his work. He came up with the logo "AIDS Silence Equals Death," which was one of the rallying cries of the AIDS crisis. And he raised millions of dollars for AIDS research and to help victims. But he also did works that were crying out against nuclear proliferation and other issues. And the crack epidemic. So he became very political later in his career, but his career was cut short. I think he died at 32 or something, just a terrible, terrible tragedy.
Mm-hmm. Okay, the next piece we are showing is a picture of, it's actually a mural, and it says actor, attorney, athlete, bibliophile. I'm going to ask you to tell us who that is.
Oh, that's Paul Robeson. Paul Robeson was probably one of the 2 or 3 most influential people of the entire 20th century. He had an incredible career. He started out as a football player. He got into, and this is around turn of the century, he got into Rutgers University and graduated and went on to Columbia University and got a law degree. And so having been a jock and then a lawyer, he actually had to quit law because people wouldn't take him seriously because he was Black, even though he'd gone through, gotten his law degree and succeeded against tremendous odds. I believe his father was a freed slave. And so he quit law to go into show business of all things and became an international superstar. He did dozens of recordings. He appeared on the Broadway stage. Eugene O'Neill wrote roles for him. And he actually became one of the very few, the only actually serious leading actor in Hollywood back in the 30s and the 40s. And his fame, and by the way, you would know his most famous movie would be Showboat, and he sings Old Man River, which if you can get to see that on YouTube, it's so inspiring and so stirring.
An incredible
It's
piece,
an
right?
amazing. But his fame actually just elevated him to the point where he could have talks with world leaders. One of them being Truman, and one of his projects was ending lynching. So he wanted to have an anti-lynching bill, and isn't it just amazing that just this year that bill went through?
Right? Isn't that incredible? You know, the amount of time it takes to have some of these civil rights laws enacted in this country is it's just a shame.
Yeah.
But we in the civil rights world continue to fight for that, and I I know that this conference is one of the ways that we do that. We bring people together to be having conversations, to have the collective voice be heard, to be able to share resources and information, best practices, and hopefully we can begin to move that lever faster. But we still have a long way to go. Speaking of a long way to go, we have a short way to go, and that we are rounding the bend at 10 o'clock pretty soon. So I've got a couple of more pieces, and then what we're going to do is wrap up, and I'll give you a few words, some time for kind of some wrap up words. The next picture that we have here, and again thinking about art in protest. This is the simple statement of "I am a man," with a bunch of men of color all holding that same sign, and in itself becomes the art, right? Is the protest itself is the art, and the photograph of this.
Right. Well, that picture was based on a protest. Um, these were workers. I can't remember actually the industry, but they had terrible, terrible working conditions. So they had a protest to try to get their working conditions in some factory or whatever.
Right.
I'm
It was
sorry, I don't
actually, yeah,
remember it.
it
Go
was
ahead.
sanitation workers in Memphis.
In Memphis.
Right,
Yeah.
and so this is the one where they killed two of the workers. That it says working conditions that killed two workers in 1968. So 1968 is the year that we had the Fair Housing Act, and yet we're still dealing with this. So signs were used by 1,300 Black sanitation workers in Memphis, which is just we're not that far away, right? We're not that far removed from the space and time where these things happened in this country. And I've always, I think that always brings a tear to my eye, the notion that we're just not that far away from all of these bad things happening. And we have so much more to go in order to bring, I think, King's dream of, the utopian world where we all get along.
Right.
We
Well,
just,
in my old age, and I just turned 70, I realized that it's never going to happen, unfortunately. The world, I've been listening to Bible stories and things like that. I've been going to church, and it's like the world hasn't changed since the Bible. There's always an oppressor, there's always an underclass, there's always somebody cheating, there's always somebody murdering and doing heinous things. And it's just up to us to try to make our own world
right.
as loving and as peaceful as we can in our own lives, and to hope that that spirit of loving and giving and sharing and welcoming can be propagated in those around you, and hopefully you'll create a bubble where the Putins don't get in and just destroy everything. But it's going to keep on happening.
Well,
That's what I learned.
yeah. Susan and I were having a conversation yesterday, Susan Forward, who was the former director of the HUD office in Boston. And we were talking about that the work that we do as civil rights activists and civil rights people who are enforcing the civil rights laws, we're going to be around for a very long time, but you have to have hope. You have to believe. You have to be able to continue to do this work well. You have to be hopeful, right? There's just a part of that it's a non-negotiable kind of skill set, and I think it is almost a skill or a heart that requires you to be able to, in the face of adversity, to push forward and to continually do that. And I
But
think
also we need to rise to the occasion, and I'll never forget how you actually pointed at me and said, it's your turn. I was very happily just making fun projects pick portraits and landscapes and stuff like that. And then I did the Rockwell collection basically just to have fun. But you said, oh, no, 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 no.
No, 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 no.
There's something important here and you've got to do it. And so here I am all this time later. And I'm so happy now that I actually have been able to make an impact, and that I can go into schools and speak to students and give them their heritage and show them how they can make a difference too, just like all the artists. I give a speech called Portraits of Freedom, where I talk about artists through the decades and centuries who've taken that extra step to just help to bring freedom to people, to themselves, and to us. And without them, we wouldn't enjoy the freedoms that we have. So I've been going into high schools and colleges and museums and giving these talks, and none of that would have been possible if you hadn't said, no, it's your turn, So now I go to battle. I go to battle with my pictures and with my speeches. And I'm happy. It's just really so gratified that my life is at this old age actually winding up, that the life that I lived is helping other people to enjoy and appreciate their own lives.
Well, speaking of that, can you just share, because there was a story that you told us once when Dr. McNeil was getting an award, and you were also getting an award at the conference a couple of years back, and you told that story, and that's I knew you had to do what you did, what you're doing now after you told that story.
Well, it's very mystical and magical, but when I was 7 years old, my mother took me and my brother to a picket line at the Woolworths in our neighborhood. Woolworths was like the CVS or Duane Reade of the day, and they basically featured lunch counters, which would not serve to Black people in the South. So Dr. McNeil got together with some friends and decided they were going to sit at the lunch counter until they were served. So they created the sit-in, and it was a tremendous, tremendous act of courage on behalf of him and the other Forest Greensboro, North Carolina, because they could have been assaulted, they could have been expelled from school, they could have been arrested, they could have been lynched. But instead, they just sat there day after day after day, and protests erupted all over the country. And so my mother took me to the picket line in front of our local Woolworths just in support of that very demonstration. And then there I was, because you'd chosen me to get an award. I didn't even know it, but I'm sitting there getting an award with the very same man who put together that protest in North Carolina, that my first protest, my first political act at 7 was in support of the same person that was sitting at the table with me, and we were getting the same piece of paper. I got it right here.
There you go.
And we got the same thing. I said, how can you even start to equate, these pictures that I'm doing? I'm just making pictures. I'm not risking my life. But it really was the most inspirational thing that I think has ever happened in my life, Jamie. So thank you.
So we have the 2-minute warning, and I'm just going to say this, the next piece up, and I think this is just, it's perfect for that. It is actually people using your art to protest.
Oh, in the streets.
That's right. It's what it should be. So this, you can tell us a little bit about that, and then I want to give you at least a minute to just kind of wrap it up. And so here's your final thoughts. I'm going to give you the final thoughts here right now.
Yeah, well, the regime had changed in Washington, and people were very, very upset about it, and were having protests. And they called me up and they said, we would like to use your images in the parade, make posters. And I said, yeah, well, sure, go right ahead. So they were actually walking down the street with my pictures, and my pictures were representing the change that they wanted to happen in the world. And that was just incredible to think that I would. I'm just one person. I live basically a very quiet life. And
not anymore. Not anymore. You have been featured all over the place. And it is such a proud moment every time I open something and I see you in the Boston Globe, the New York Times, I see you on TV. It is just, it's so wonderful. And to know that you continually support the work that we do at the conference. And so I totally appreciate that. I do know that we are rounding the bend. I think it is time for us to call it a day. Again, Pops Peterson, thank you so much for joining us, the Fair
Thank you,
Housing and
Amy.
Civil Rights Conference. And we look forward to seeing you again the next time we are in person. John, I'm going to give it back to you. Thank you all so much for spending
Thank you.
some time and listening to Pops and I have a wonderful fireside chat about art. Thanks, John.
And thank you both so much. And again, everybody, welcome to day 2 of the Fair Housing and Civil Rights Conference. And our first morning workshops will begin in about 15 minutes. We'll see you then. Have a good day, everyone.
Great. Thanks, John. Thanks, everyone.